On the 31st of July 1970, a 300-year-old naval tradition ended. The daily ritual in the Royal Navy of receiving a tot of rum. It's remembered as Black Tot Day. It was a tradition dating back to Cromwell's Admiral William Penn capturing Jamaica. And over the next 300 years, it became a cherished tradition that maybe some of you veterans remember. Drop me a comment if you do. Initially, the ration was over half a pint of rum per day, but over time that was reduced and quite literally watered down. And whilst the tradition is no more, references to it are still very much part of everyday English language, from feeling groggy to splicing the mainsail. So join me as I explore the story of the Royal Navy's daily rum ration and Black Tot Day. The formal issuing of alcohol on Royal Navy ships was recorded as far back as the 16th century, and there was a very practical reason. On long voyages, especially in the tropics, the barrels containing water for the crew would become stagnant, often developing a green algae on the surface. Yuck! It was realised that liquids that had been subjected to a brewing or distilling process were actually healthier than the water. Initially, beer was the chosen alternative to water, and sailors were given a daily allowance of 1 gallon per sailor of booze. Now, before you fall off your seat, you need to remember that most of the beer was very weak by modern standards, about 1%, which is nowadays in a supermarket called low alcohol beer. Nevertheless, 1 gallon of beer per sailor per day presented a bigger logistical problem. It required a lot of storage. Ships' captains started to look to spirits as a substitute, principally brandy. But that too presented a problem. Brandy comes from France, and guess who the Royal Navy were often at war with? But in 1655, everything changed, and the naval tradition of drinking a tot of rum was born. It was in that year that Vice Admiral William Penn captured Jamaica from the Spanish. And on Jamaica, a different spirit was already being manufactured: rum. Initially an ad hoc arrangement, the daily tot of rum became mandatory in the Royal Navy in 1731, when all sailors were to receive half a pint of rum per day. That is the equivalent of 5 double rums at 55%. Now, that is serious drinking. You might not be too surprised to find out that this daily ration of half a pint of rum per day led to some serious drunkenness aboard His Majesty's ships. Finally, it resulted in the order to Captains number 349 on the 21st of August 1740. The order reduced both the amount of rum issued and lowered the strength. Henceforth, Royal Navy sailors would receive a quarter pint per day, split into 2 servings, one before noon and one at the other end of the day. Also going forward, the rum ration would be diluted, 4 parts water to 1 part rum. The man behind this move was Admiral Edward Vernon. Highly popular amongst his men for looking after the common ratings welfare, Vernon had joined the Royal Navy in 1700 when he was 15 years old. He was to remain in the service for 46 years. 4 years into his naval career, he was present at the capture of Gibraltar, and by 1740 had risen to the rank of Vice Admiral. He had also represented the Cornish seat of Penryn in Parliament since the 1720s. It was whilst combining these naval and parliamentary careers, something by the way that wasn't unique at this time, that he came across a certain Robert Jenkins. In the early 1730s, Jenkins' ship had been boarded by Spanish coastguards off their colony of Florida in North America, and in the ensuing altercation, his ear was cut off. Vernon took up his case back in Britain, and Britain and Spain found themselves at war. The War of Jenkins' Ear. During that war, Vernon was back at sea in the Caribbean, where he led a successful attack on the Spanish port of Portobello in Panama. His popularity amongst his crews increased when, contrary to Admiralty orders, he divided the sizable haul of captured silver and gold amongst his men. Incidentally, the Portobello areas of Edinburgh and London were named after this successful attack. Also as an aside, serving on Vernon's flagship in this war, HMS Princess Charlotte, was a young man from the American colony of Virginia, Lawrence Washington. He returned home and named his estate after the Admiral, and when Lawrence died, his younger half-brother, George, inherited Mount Vernon, and the rest, as they say, is history. Anyway, let's get back to Admiral Vernon and his rum. Vernon was famous, apart from his treatment of his sailors, for wearing a waterproof cloak in bad weather. Made from a rough mixture of mohair and silk called grogram, the Admiral was nicknamed Old Grog. And that nickname transferred across to the rum ration stipulated by Vernon. Grog. From that, another word entered the English language, for when sailors had had too much grog to drink, they felt groggy. Maybe you've experienced that feeling sometime in the past. Where possible, Vernon advised, but he didn't order the captains, to add some sugar and lime juice to the rum ration in an attempt to ward off scurvy. And hence we have another phrase associated with Royal Navy sailors in particular and the English in general: limeys. Members in my supporters club know that I love going down these historical rabbit holes, and you can find out more about that supporters club at the end and also by clicking on the link in the description below. To ensure that the rum was diluted in the correct ratio, it was ordered that it was diluted upon the deck in the presence of the lieutenant of the watch. The rum ration itself was distributed from a cask made from a half barrel, called a scuttled butt. As the men queued, they exchanged information, news and rumours, leading to the phrase scuttlebutt for gossip. Over time, the scuttlebutt was replaced by the grog tub, a specially designed oak tub with brass or copper hoops. On each side were emblazoned the King, God bless him, or the Queen, God bless her, as seen on this example, which I saw when visiting HMS Warrior in Portsmouth Historic Dockyard recently. It was a tradition that would last over 200 years, and one that many old sailors who served in the Royal Navy remember with fondness. As an aside, if you ever get the opportunity to visit the Historic Dockyard in Portsmouth, I thoroughly recommend it. Whilst the star attractions are HMS Victory, the Victorian HMS Warrior, and Henry VIII's Mary Rose, there is so much more to see. Anyway, that's enough free advertising for them. Let's get back to the story. There was one exception to this strict ration of a quarter of a pint of rum served in split measures twice a day. In the days of sail, so we're principally talking the 18th century through to the end of the Napoleonic Wars in particular, one of the most difficult and demanding tasks was to trim the sails, using ropes called braces. The most difficult of all was the huge mainsail, and even more so in the heat of a battle. It could often mean the difference between victory or defeat. Often opposing ships would aim to destroy their enemy's mainsail and its rigging. And so the men who spliced or repaired the huge hemp ropes of the Mainbrace were often drawn from the most able of able seamen, and were awarded a double tot of rum after a battle. Sometimes the whole ship's company would be given an extra ration, for instance to mark the monarch's birthday, and on such occasions a flag or semaphore signal would be sent to splice the Mainbrace. It's resulted in yet another phrase that's entered the English language: splice the Mainbrace, or to have a drink. There are so many naval phrases that turn up in everyday English. Maybe I should make a special episode exploring them. What do you think? Like all traditions, there was a lot more to it than simply dishing out some rum twice a day. ED&F Man, a London-based company, were given the task of providing a consistent brand of rum to the Navy. In 1810, the Admiralty approved their exact blend, based upon the British colonies in the West Indies. British Guiana, which is now Guyana, provided the main component, with more full-bodied rums from Jamaica and lighter rums from Barbados and Trinidad, adding to the flavour. Despite the reduced and watered-down quantities of the daily tot of rum, by the end of the Napoleonic Wars, there were still concerns about drunkenness on board ships. Some sailors would store their daily tot until they had enough for a good drinking spree. In 1824, the daily rum ration was reduced still further, from a quarter of a pint to an eighth of a pint, or 71 millilitres. As evangelical Christianity swept through Britain in the Victorian period, there were even calls for the whole ritual to be abolished. Instead, it was decided that the rum ration would only be issued once a day, in the morning. As part of this cleaner, sober navy, is there such a thing? The daily rum ration was eventually removed from officers in 1881 and petty officers after the First World War. After the Second World War, the daily issuing of rum to ratings started to feel at odds with the sophisticated ships and weaponry that the Royal Navy was now employing. Already the tradition was starting to fray. Aircrews, for instance, had to have a clear 4 hours between consumption and duty. Consequently, the religious timings of distribution of the tot started to change too. Finally, in December 1969, the Admiralty Board recommended abolition of the age-old tradition as no longer appropriate or safe in a nuclear age. It led to a heated 15-hour debate in Parliament on the 28th of January 1970, which is sometimes referred to as the Great Rum Debate. At the end of that debate, Parliament voted to support the Admiralty Board's recommendation. And on the 31st of July 1970, at 6 bells in the forenoon watch, or 11 a.m. to those of us who haven't served in the Royal Navy, crews queued up for the last time to receive their tot of rum. It was called Black Tot Day. Admiral of the Fleet, Michael Lefanu, known as Dry Ginger, penned a ditty to mark the occasion, which was relayed to the fleet across the world. It went, "Most farewell messages try to jerk a tear from the eye, but I say to you lot, very sad about the tot. But thank you, good luck, and goodbye." The level of poignancy as he said farewell to a 300-year tradition was increased when it was announced that he had been diagnosed with terminal leukemia. The World War II veteran, who had been present at the Japanese surrender aboard USS Missouri, was not just saying goodbye to the tot, but to his Royal Navy too. He died in November that year. On Black Tot Day, some sailors wore black armbands as they lined up for their last rum ration. Sailors at land base HMS Collingwood held a mock funeral procession, and on board some ships, the grog tubs were ceremonially buried at sea. And so a long naval tradition that had survived countless wars with the Spanish and the French, the Crimean War, the First and the Second World Wars, and countless smaller engagements passed into history. But many of its phrases survive in the English language. Black Tot Day, 31st of July, 1970. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you enjoyed that story. And if you did, please show your support by joining my supporters club. There's a link in the description below. Lots more stories planned for you, including the wartime service of actor Christopher Lee, plus the only man to have ever been awarded the Victoria Cross and the Iron Cross. In the meantime, why not check out one of my other red videos, such as the episode about the War of Jenkins' Ear, or Nelson at Trafalgar. Thanks for your support. Keep well, and I'll see you again very soon.